¿Qué onda, amigos? What's up, guys? Welcome to How to Learn Spanish, Episode 1. Start listening to real Spanish. My name is Levi Flint, and in this podcast, I focus on teaching you exactly what the name of the podcast says, how to learn Spanish, right? So I'm trying to teach you the methodology, I'm trying to teach you the system that you can follow to go from zero or a very beginner level all the way up to high intermediate level of fluency. So, like I said, in this episode, we are going to be kicking off the very first step that I recommend you take on your Spanish learning journey. And again, this journey is for people who want to actually be fluent in the language, not get credits for a college class, not just get to a level where you can take a trip down to Cancun, Mexico, and get around, and that's it. But if you legitimately want to be fluent in the language, this is definitely the podcast for you. If you didn't listen to the first episode, so this is episode 1, but I also have episode 0, and that was the introduction to learning Spanish, an introduction just to the podcast in general, and a little bit about me, who I am. So make sure to check that episode out if you have not checked that out yet. But this is definitely step 1, okay? And as I said in the intro to this episode, what we want to begin doing when we're fresh, we're just about to start learning Spanish, we're deciding, okay, like what's the first step I should take? Is it Duolingo? Is it watching movies in Spanish? Is it doing Rosetta Stone? Is it taking a college course? Okay. Step 1 should definitely be to begin listening to real Spanish. And it sounds extremely simple, but it really is that simple. What I want you to do is to start listening to real Spanish, and it can be conversation, as in monologue, talking to you directly. It can be Spanish conversation, two people talking, a group of people talking. It does not matter, as long as it is real conversation. As long as it is real Spanish. So what I mean by that is not really, it could be something scripted, I guess, but ideally it's going to be more of a free-flowing type of Spanish. What kind of sources could you use for this? And that, very simple. I would say podcasts. I would say Netflix or Hulu series. I would say telenovelas, and even movies. You could do that as well. The radio is a little too random. I don't like the radio very much, but I really like those series, or those options. And also the news in Spanish, if you have access to that. Okay, so let's take a step back. Why is this important? Why is it so important to begin by listening to Spanish? Because you might be asking or thinking to yourself, I'm not going to understand anything. I'm not going to understand what's being said if I'm listening. I'm a beginner, right? Okay, don't worry about that. That's something that your average Joe language learner is going to obsess about, but you're not going to do that, and neither am I. And the reason for this is, whenever you start out, your step 1 is just to listen to Spanish. Listen to a lot of Spanish on a daily basis, at least ideally 25 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, listening to Spanish throughout your day. The reason for this is you want to give your brain time to get used to the language. And so whenever you're learning a language, your brain needs time to get used to a language and to process the language. And when I say process, it's processing the accent, it's processing the rhythm, the intonation of the speaker, it's processing different words and maybe some sort of repetitive type of grammatical structures that pop up. And you might not notice this on a conscious level, but subconsciously you are going to be picking up these things as you go along. And I think that having that attitude of, I don't care if I understand anything, I'm just going to listen. Just going to listen. And don't distract yourself with other things. But, if you're washing dishes, you're picking up your house, you're folding laundry, and you're just listening. That is step one, okay? Your average person is never going to do this because they're going to say, well, I don't understand anything. What's the point? But understand that and especially thinking back to when you're a baby, people always think that, oh, well, adults are going to learn so much different than a baby. It's true. That is true to an extent. But the fundamentals are still there. When you're a baby, you don't talk. You lay in your crib, you're looking up, and mom and dad are talking to you. Mom and dad are having conversations. Mom and dad are having friends over, and they're having conversations. And before you say your first words or even you're making your first noises, you are just listening. You're listening, you're listening, you're listening. And again, maybe you're not giving it your full attention, but like when you're folding the laundry and doing dishes and, mopping your floor, you're just listening. It's just kind of going in your ear, and it's going to process this really interesting thing is happening with language, which is completely, it's such a human, I don't know how to put it, but it's such a human thing, language in general. And so our brains have evolved over millions of years to take language that's coming in, to process it, and then to eventually begin trying to mimic it. Okay? So that's why this is so important. And that is, I don't even know if I really need to make this a long episode, but I think that is really, that's the point. That is the step one. If I go back in time, I would not have messed around with, even you can still take a course, and I'm going to talk about the next steps in future episodes, obviously, for the podcast. But that's what I would do. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't even worry. I would be like, I'm just going to listen to this podcast. I'm going to listen to some series, some telenovelas. And, in my personal Spanish learning journey, I talk about this in episode 0 a little bit. I struggled. And I don't just say that to, oh yeah, let me motivate these guys. No, I legitimately really sucked in my Spanish classes. I was not good. And I was really confused and frustrated. And it wasn't until I kind of reprogrammed my routine, my learning routine, my methodology. And I remember one of the big things that I was doing is I was watching telenovelas in Spanish, and my family would make fun of me. Everybody would make fun of me. But I would watch telenovelas. I'd be recording them on a DVR at the time. And I'm listening, pause it, rewind it 15 seconds, listen again. And I just did a lot of listening, and that helped me enormously. Last thing, before I end this episode of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit or give you a few specifics. So I mentioned podcasts and series. So a couple of, and let me rewind real quick. In case you missed the first episode, or in case I actually didn't say this in the first episode, I think I did. But in this podcast, I'm going to focus entirely on Mexican Spanish. And that doesn't mean that you have to obsess with Mexican Spanish if that's not really what you want to do. If you're wanting to do, to have a different type of focus, if you want to focus on Argentinian Spanish or Colombian Spanish or Spanish from Spain, just take what I say like the general thing, but sometimes I'll make references to Spanish from Mexico. And it's very important to focus on that one dialect, focus in, get used to that one, and do your best to master that one. Okay, so for podcasts, you can check out News in Slow Spanish, Latino. That's going to be more Latino, more Mexican. You can check out my podcast, the Mexican Fluency Podcast. It's an immersion podcast. Me and my wife have conversations about different topics. You can check out, what's another one? Telemundo Noticias podcast. That is going to be a news podcast. They're based in the US, so all the topics that they talk about are relevant here, which is great. So those are just a few. There's definitely a lot of podcasts, and in future episodes I'll talk about these different ones, but those are definitely pretty good. For series, you can go to Netflix or Hulu. They both have some pretty good ones. Club de Cuervos is a Netflix series. There's a bunch of telenovelas on Hulu. You can check those out. And I'll talk more about the specifics of those as well in future episodes. What else? What else do we have here? Okay, telenovelas. So a telenovela is, you probably know, but it's a very cheesy type of series, and it's a very long series, and the language that you hear there is a little bit more simplified. It's like the conversations, but it's kind of like, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to sound mean, but they're shows made for people that of all, let's just say it. Let's just go from the lowest end of IQ all the way up to the very highest could enjoy a telenovela. So you can be a complete simpleton and like you really like this show, or you could be, a little bit more like refined, I guess I could say, in your and like let's say you like Christopher Nolan movies, right? And you like to think and you really like to be into it, but you can still get some joy out of a telenovela. Or if you're like you just like simple stuff and you're like, I don't want to think, then a telenovela is definitely for you as well, because the story is so dumb and the acting is so silly, but the Spanish is incredible. The Spanish that you're going to be hearing, it's clear, it's crisp, it's usually, and it's the situations, the scenarios that the characters are in are understandable, and it's going to be phenomenal for your listening. Okay, so check those out. I was going to say a telenovela I'm watching now with Rennie, my wife, is Marido en Alquiler. And we're both pretty stupid. I'm not going to lie. Like, we like stupid stuff. I love, like, make you think type of series and movies, but I'll watch stupid things that just make me laugh as well. So telenovelas are for me as well. So I was making jokes earlier, but I'll watch. And I watch to listen to improve my Spanish. So let's stop right here. That is all I have for this episode of the show. I hope you're liking it. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, make sure to give it a 5-star review. If you like it, of course. And that really is going to help the show get more eyes on it, get more attention, and to ideally help more people out. Check out what I'm doing over at Mexican Fluency, MexicanFluency.com. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and I actually have a course that is going to go along with this podcast called Fluency Hour. Check that out. You can access that through MexicanFluency.com. And I will talk more about that in future episodes. I don't want to overwhelm you right now. But that's all we got. So start listening. That is step 1 of learning Spanish. And focus on podcasts, series, telenovelas, or news. If you have access to the news, it's also an awesome source of listening content. Okay, so check all those out. Movies get a little complex and a little weird, and the radio is very random and kind of goofy. Don't waste your time with that. That is all I have, guys. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio. I'll see you in the next episode. Adios.